What's going on, social media? My name is Walt Florio. I'm a lifelong Baltimore Orioles fan, and today I'm going to be discussing why the 2025 Orioles need to take a look at what the 2015 Baltimore Orioles did 10 years ago and learn from what happened in that experience. Much like the 2015 team was coming off of a couple years of winning and got off to a slow start, making it become apparent that the 2015 team was not going to make the playoffs. This year's 2025 Orioles are coming off of a couple years in which the team made the playoffs and are off to a slow start, and it's becoming more and more apparent that this year's team is not going to make the playoffs. Let's take a look at what the 2015 Orioles did and what they could and should have done instead. The Orioles had depleted their farm system some during the 2012 to 2014 years at the trade deadlines to try and make a playoff push, which was more than understandable. However, in 2015, when it was clear that they were not going to make the playoffs, they still decided to try and become quote-unquote buyers at the trade deadline. The team gave up even more prospects from their thin farm system to acquire a player named Gerardo Parra. Now, while it is true that Parra was having a good first half of the year with the Brewers, this was a move that the Orioles did not need to make because the team had no chance at making the playoffs realistically, and they were just giving up prospects to thin their farm system with a move that was made in vain. Let's take a look at what the Orioles, in my opinion, should have done instead. I believe that the Orioles should have gone through what is called a soft rebuild in 2015. It's where they could have traded some guys that were on expiring contracts and gotten some nice prospects back in return to replenish their depleted farm system some, and that would open up the window of the young core that they had and extend the period of the chances of them winning for longer. Let's take a look at a couple of guys that the Orioles could have dealt at the 2015 trade deadline when they had no chance of making the playoffs and improved their farm system. The first player that the Orioles should have traded in 2015 is Chris Davis. Now, Davis is a guy who is in the middle of a monster 3-year stretch and could have gotten a ton of prospects in return. Chris Davis was in a contract season in 2015, and the Orioles were in a position where they basically had to choose between paying Chris Davis and Manny Machado. The move that they should have done is pay Machado because Machado was younger and had much more potential for long-term success than what Chris Davis did. He was more versatile of a player also. Davis is a guy that the Orioles should have traded for a monster return. However, instead, they did not trade Davis and then ended up paying him what was the worst contract in Baltimore Orioles history the following offseason. The Orioles also had a young player by the name of Christian Walker in their system, who could have been the first base replacement for Chris Davis. They could have taken a look at what Walker could have done over the next couple years and seen if they had somebody for a long-term replacement for Davis. Walker has ended up having a nice career after the Orioles moved on from him. The next player the Orioles could have traded at the 2015 trade deadline to really improve their farm system is Wei-Yin Chen. Chen is a starter who was having a really good season for the Orioles in 2015 and was also in a contract season. The Orioles could have moved Chen and replenished their farm system in a season that the Orioles were not going anywhere. Simply by just moving Wei-Yin Chen and Chris Davis at the 2015 trade deadline, the Orioles could have really replenished their farm system and brought in a lot of talent that they could have used to build around players such as Manny Machado, Kevin Galson, and Jonathan Scope to really improve their team. They could have also had veterans like Adam Jones and Nick Markakis still on the roster, and the window with those players, along with the prospects they would have brought in from the Chen and Chris Davis deals, and it would have opened up the Orioles' window to win for much longer. Instead, what the Orioles did is not trade any of their players they could have traded, and then extend the wrong player in Chris Davis, and their window ended up being slammed shut, and they had to start a full-on rebuild in 2018. Teams like the Orioles that are not a huge market team absolutely have to make smart decisions with things like who they choose to extend and who they choose to keep and who they choose to trade. Let's take a look at what some of the players at the 2025 roster could trade off at this year's trade deadline to improve their depleted farm system from the moves that they have made over the last couple years while they were trying to win. First, we have Cedric Mullins. Cedric Mullins is in a career year, contract year, much like Chris Davis was back in 2015. Mullins is off to the best year he has had in several years and might have another 30-30 season this year. Mullins is a guy that they could really fleece another team at the deadline for and bring in a lot of really nice prospects for. Mullins' speed and defense, as well as the good offensive season he's having this year, would make him desirable to a lot of teams on the market, and the Orioles could use that situation to really take advantage of somebody this July and improve their farm system. The Orioles could also trade Zach Eflin once Eflin is back off of the injured reserve list. Eflin is a pitcher who has had a really good stint of success here in Baltimore since we acquired him at last year's trade deadline. Eflin is somebody who is a very solid number 2 or number 3 pitcher that will bring back a nice prospect haul as long as he can show that he's healthy once he returns from the IR. The Orioles could also potentially look to shop Sugano, who they signed to a one-year contract and is having an amazing start to this season. Sugano is somebody that the Orioles, if they choose not to extend him past this year, could use to really get another 2 or 3 solid prospects and improve their farm system to open up the window for this young core to possibly win again from next year and beyond. The last player that I believe the Orioles could look to shop is Sir Anthony Dominguez. Dominguez is another player that the Orioles acquired at last year's trade deadline and has had nothing but success in his time here in Baltimore. Dominguez is a guy that is in a contract year as well, and the Orioles could use to once again get another couple solid prospects to restock the farm system and be good to go. What the Orioles should do this year is trade off some of these guys and promote some of the talent they have in the farm system to take a look at what these guys can do at the big league level, and then this offseason have a solid plan of players to add and try to make a big push going forward in 2026 with Kyle Bradish and Grayson Rodriguez back in the rotation. They could add another number 1 or number 2 starting pitcher this offseason and be ready to go from 2006 and beyond with a much wider window from the prospects they acquire by trading Dominguez, Mullins, Sugano, and Eflin. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. What are your thoughts? Please subscribe, follow, like, and share the video. Leave a comment with your thoughts. And as always, I hope you guys have a great day.